Hello everyone, my name is Jackafe and I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video. I wanted to highlight some of my experiences in Path of Exile 2 and overall combat some of the criticism or feedback that the game has been getting. So I've sunk over 50 hours in Path of Exile 2, and considering that it released just a week ago without being some fucking huge popular content creator or streamer, I think that is already enough proof about how I feel about the game. The innovation and risk that the game's developer, Grinding Gear Games, took with the game to innovate the genre, I think is nothing short of amazing. The game is absolutely fun to play, and given its positive review score on Steam at 83% and counting at the time of this recording, I feel it's safe to say that that's a general sentiment that most of us are feeling. Would I even be so bold as to say that many of us prefer PoE 2 than its predecessor? Now, that's a bold statement coming from someone that really didn't dive into PoE 1 all too much, but I can confidently say, without a doubt, that PoE 2 is the game I prefer. No question. Shit, I'll even take a Pepsi challenge to that effect. So at its core, PoE 1 and PoE 2 offer similar things, right? They're a top-down, isometric ARPG with a deep progression system and a whole lot of loot. On the other hand, its gameplay, and I believe who the game's audience is intended for, is different. And that's a good thing. Maybe I'm being too critical, or maybe I'm being too fucking cynical, but I can't help but feel that the feedback the game's been getting is mostly based on people's previous experience of its predecessor, and that this feedback is somewhat based on players' expectations with what they've been familiar with before. And my concern here is that this feedback is slowly shaping PoE 2 away from its intended vision. Now, I have nothing but respect for content creators, especially in the ARPG space, those that are typically the loudest in the room, but I feel the people that have the most influence are fans of the game's predecessor, and they wish to slowly shape the game to be more like what they grew up with. And there's comfort in familiarity. Fuck! There's comfort in familiarity. And change is never easy. And despite all the positive reviews that the game's been getting, and 83% of us are statistically really enjoying the game, I can't help but constantly read or be bombarded with articles or videos about what the game lacks or where it falls short. It's become so prominent now that it overshadows what I believe the game is doing well or what it's got right. And it's hard to see that, especially when we're bombarded with constant feedback about that the game is too difficult or too janky or too slow, or that the maps are too big, or that the progression system isn't as robust, or that the game is unbalanced, or that there isn't enough loot or currency, or some even go as far to say that the dodge roll mechanic isn't enjoyable or even necessary. Now, consumer feedback is great. I mean, that's the fucking point of early access. It's a period of testing where players can offer their feedback and developers can modify and make changes based on it. But is there such a thing as too much feedback or too much change? And most importantly, too much change too quickly that it shapes away the game's overall intended vision? I don't know, but I hope that's not becoming the case. So change is good, but again, change done too quickly isn't. And there's been a lot of changes done to PoE 2 within barely a week of it being out. Changes to its balance, dodge rolling, loot and currency drops, the list goes on. And this change is being done when most of us haven't even beaten the campaign or even put the hours or attempts to. The feedback, therefore, is largely based on the following: the select few who have influence, who prefer the game's predecessor, or the 1% that reached max level. Either way, those don't represent the majority of statistical input, or the data pool isn't large enough to make that determination of the game's current state. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a fucking mathematician. The other group of gamers providing feedback, I believe, simply lost patience in attempting to understand the game's systems or understand enemy boss encounters to prevail. Because yes, this is not a normal thing that is accustomed to ARPGs. Either way, I think that the feedback that is given to the game is being brought up by the minority rather than the majority, who I think love the game and wish to keep it as it is today. And of course, people who tend to not enjoy an experience are more aptly the ones that are going to vocalize it anyway. And again, don't get me wrong, I think some changes are good. I think having, bosses drop rare and uniques is a good change, right? Nothing is worse than prevailing a boss fight and getting no rewards from it. Or the fact that you can now teleport to checkpoints. Like, I'm not a fucking idiot to undermine consumer feedback or how important it is. I just hope that the game doesn't become a loot pinata where we one-shot bosses ignoring their mechanics completely to the point that we make the dodge roll irrelevant. All in all, I hope that this feedback is taken with some reservations from the developer. Trust, but verify. Now, people who have played ARPGs are certainly subject matter experts, but not all ARPGs are created or made equally. Not all of them are the same from a gameplay perspective, and not all of them are intended to appeal to every ARPG fan as a whole. When you have a genre that is so saturated, it's important that developers find new ways to innovate and break the mold, and that is what PoE 2 has done, and I couldn't be fucking happier. And of course, I know people are sick of hearing about it, but this is truly the Dark Souls of the ARPG space. And it's amazing to me that simply one mechanic, the dodge roll mechanic, can fundamentally and completely alter the experience. Now, the game is hard, but isn't that the fucking trend nowadays in gaming? Which, of course, has been brought up by the very popular Souls-like genre. The fact that you have to overcome a surmountable challenge and the dopamine that comes with overcoming that obstacle, right? Whether that's through changing your build or finding new ways to increase your player's power. Isn't that the whole reason we now praise Miyazaki and From Software? And I get it. They're two different fucking genres. However, it's the same methodology. Now, Grinding Gear Games has already addressed some of the issues of difficulty, right, by increasing loot drops and currency. I just hope that this was brought on with what they wanted, and it wasn't based on the pressure of the community. And certainly by some where their voices are the loudest. And I gotta say, if you don't enjoy the game, then you don't have to fucking play it. I know that may be hard to hear. Just move on, right? Let the people who do enjoy the game in its current state enjoy it. Personally, from what I experienced throughout the game's campaign and throughout Cruel difficulty, is that the game is fair. Fuck, it's more than fair. I'm currently level 55 as a warrior in Cruel, and I am literally one-shotting fucking bosses when the stagger bar is full. You don't believe me? Watch.
Break! I'm not ready.
And yeah, don't get me wrong, one-shotting bosses is fucking cool and all, but I definitely don't want that to be the norm. It trivializes everything. It just makes it numb, if you will. Now, this was made with my own build as a new player without looking up shit online and barely playing PoE 1. And for those interested in that build, I will be posting it soon. Anyway, the deaths that I encountered in the game, and boy, there were many of them, but that was due to my decision making. Whether that is through the mechanics, my build, my general understanding of how the game works, or simply because I was too fucking greedy. The game actually goes out of its way to structure itself so that it's easier to learn, and that is abundant in its gem system. Grinding Gear Games knows fucking balance. They know the content that exists, they know whether it's optional or not, they know the power levels that the various systems give you, whether it's gems, loot, currency, or the passive tree. They know the overall power level compared to the threats that lie ahead, because every single modification to a player's power has to correlate to the enemies that you see also. So that's the tricky part, that even the smallest changes to a numerical value will have a cascading effect to the player's experience. So who are we to say increase loot or bosses are too hard without actually knowing all the data points that it affects? Now, I can't speak for any of you, but I'm personally not a video game developer, nor have I even come close to fucking consider making something as complicated as an ARPG. And I can't even, for the life of me, comprehend all the variables and big dick brain math that goes into it. I can probably safely assume also that most of us aren't as well. And because of this, we don't have an understanding of all the variables that come into play when making a game like this. And this is especially true when it comes to balancing. Grinding Gear Games has over 18 years of experience when it comes to this shit. And who knows more than them on the variables that go behind things and how the gameplay should be based on the intended design or their intended vision. So how they initially intended for the game to play is their fucking prerogative because they're the fucking experts. So for example, if they implemented a ton of nerfs and it affects a lot of people's builds, then who are we to complain? They do so with a fundamental understanding because that is all they have ever done. And I mean, imagine us criticizing a fucking doctor or try to offer them fucking feedback on how to do open heart surgery. And yes, I do understand that there are some things that are wrong with the game. For an example, if you are to nerf a player's build, well then you should at least make the respec cost a lot cheaper. For sure, there are repercussions and there are things they can even get wrong. I also haven't dived a lot into PoE 1, so I can't really make a determination which systems or mechanics are favorable and do some fucking comparison. And I think that's a blessing. The whole point I'm trying to make is that they shouldn't be compared and that they offer separate experiences that cater to separate people. And negative feedback is oftentimes seen with sequels, right? Most notably in movies and video games where the sequel can never match the expectations of the first. And yes, there are always exceptions. Red Dead 2, Diablo 2, Age of Empires 2, the list goes on. But more often than not, if something is too different than what people are accustomed to, then it's seen with some negativity, right? Like classic WoW is an example of this. No changes. Now, PoE 1 is a great game, don't get me wrong. Nothing is better than doing endgame maps with some busted-ass build, and you're just flying across through it with some zen flow state listening to lo-fi beats. But that game already exists, and that game is still being supported. This is something else. This is a different game. This appeals to a different audience, and with that, I don't want to see a fucking blend of the two. Is PoE 2 perfect? No. Is it intended for everyone? No. Will every PoE 1 player be satisfied or stick to this as their intended game of choice? No. Does the game need some quality of life improvements? Sure. Does the game need some revision of balancing? I have no fucking clue because I didn't develop the game. Nor do I have any knowledge or math behind it. Nor do I have any fucking credibility or experience to make that determination at all. If I were to provide some feedback, because I guess I've been playing ARPGs my whole life, it would again be making the respec costs a lot cheaper or providing some type of token. If the game developers are going to modify and nerf builds and it affects some players and they're unable to easily change that build because the respec costs are too high and it makes them stuck, yes, absolutely, I feel like that's very unfair. Some other feedback I would give, and this is largely due to players that are struggling, is to implement different difficulty modes or otherwise additional optional content that they can do instead of spamming, right, the same map over and over to farm. And I agree, that can get tedious. But isn't ARPGs grindy inherently? Shit, a lot of games are grindy. So I mean, take World of Warcraft, for example. Players are gated in player power to do raids because those raids have the specific items they need. And raids inherently are the same map over and over again. It's the same grind. You know what I'm saying? So how is this any different other than the fact that grinding the maps today are a little tedious because there's just not various content in it. So I would say as a feedback point, add more little random, events that happen within these maps, right, to make the experience more enjoyable. Other feedback I would say is to add more defensive nodes in the passive tree. I find, and this is specifically for the warrior, that some skills and abilities you have to charge to have its greatest effect or impact, but it's hard to get off that charge when enemies are hitting you and you're fucking dead before you can get off that charge. So either some type of modifications to that skill that as you're charging, your armor increases, or, you know, would probably be the easier way to fix that. So yeah, no game is perfect, but I feel like this game has a solid foundation, and I'm truly enjoying the different level of gameplay and pacing that I've seen from other games in the genre. All in all, what I'm trying to say is, grinding gear games, please take the feedback with reservation and don't change the overall vision or pacing that this game is intended to have. I personally love the fact that the loot is scarce. I love the fact that the game is difficult. I love the fact that I have to revise my build or gearing for overall progression. I love that the bosses are difficult with one-shot mechanics and a generally slower paced combat experience. I love the dodge roll mechanic. So yeah, all I'm saying is I hope that the feedback and changes done to the game don't head towards more of a direction of PoE 1 and change the intended vision due to the pressure of the community. Because this game 100% appeals to me more than its predecessor. This is the ARPG I've been waiting for quite some time, since Diablo 2, to be honest. Anyway, what do you guys think? I would love to hear it in the comments. I'll catch you guys on the next one.